Okay, well, welcome to this Choir Nerd, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am Mark David Obenza, and I am your host. And I've got my cousin Kelly Schwarze on the horn today, gonna share us some tricks of the trade. And I thought maybe Kelly, why don't you just say a little bit about yourself and how you got into filmmaking?
Wow. I mean, it's been a long time. I've been doing this for about 22 years, and it feels like it's just been a roller coaster ride. But I still feel like I just got into the business. Even though I've been in it for this long, I still feel like a baby in this whole thing. But yeah, I'm a filmmaker. I've been in Las Vegas now most of my life, and I produce feature films. But I also have a production studio, and we do services for all types of different products and clients and things. And we shoot TV shows occasionally when there's not a pandemic raging.
Nice, good. And so, where are you based?
We're based out of Las Vegas.
And you're what's the name of your company?
We're Indie Film Factory. I'm actually sitting in the studio building today because it's quiet here today. But yeah, this is a pretty famous studio here in Las Vegas. We've been around for 10 years at this location, and everything from major television shows, documentaries, and films have been shot right behind me in this room.
Nice. Well, I have to say, if anyone hasn't seen your latest film, Abigail, and if they're into that kind of horror suspense stuff, I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon, and it is your latest movie that released just this year?
Yeah, we released it in March. It was a little ahead of schedule. We hadn't planned to release it until late April. But obviously, the pandemic kind of made sense for us just to kind of get it out. So we put it out this year, and it's done very well. I mean, it really has been stunning how well received the movie has, and how many people it's reached all over the world. So it's quite humbling.
Yeah, no, I think like many have found their way down a rabbit hole of Netflix and what's available on demand, and I definitely went through a horror movie. I actually am sort of still on a kick. So, and I know that there are people out there that need a good horror fix. So I highly recommend Abigail.
I appreciate it. And it's close to Halloween, so it's tis the season, right?
Tis the season, that's right.
Tis the season.
Well, so Kelly, I think a lot of people listening will be musicians or performers, and as you know, COVID has kept us off the stage, especially singing, as it is akin to a bio-terrorist attack, a super spreader event. And so we are being forced to figure out how to deliver our goods on this digital medium. And if there's anything, it's really shown how important the live performance experience is. And it's something to cherish, and we look forward to being able to deliver that again. But so now we've all become very amateur filmmakers and audio engineers in the process. And when we normally have seasons, concert seasons, about average like 4 or more concerts that we'll produce, and we're going to try to I think many of us are going to try to kind of deliver sort of videos instead of live concerts.
Right.
And so the challenge ahead of us is, how do we make that interesting? There is the sort of straight ahead concerts that you can see, at least in the olden days, on Channel 9, just straight through, just a video recording of a concert beginning to end, without anything sort of interspersed. But I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong or right in this, but it seems like maybe it would be more advantageous for us to try to create something a little more interesting than that, because it's maybe too boring. I mean, I worry that it's too boring just to do that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, this whole thing is really shown all of us how much we took live performance for granted. We took it for granted, and I think once things are kind of turning a page and it's safe to kind of get back together collectively, I think you're going to see a better understanding and appreciation for performance art. And it is something that we're seeing here in Las Vegas, obviously with all of our shows closed down and all that stuff. And everybody's grappling with how to take what used to be a person-to-person commitment and bring it to a virtual medium, which wasn't really designed that way. I mean, so visual content is great for a lot of things, but it is not in a lot of ways good necessarily for the concert experience. I mean, it's a means to the end. But but there's a lot of things that are beneficial to this. Number one, you're able to reach a wider audience, as we all know, through this, because now people don't physically have to be in this place, in a particular place. So I think ultimately what it means for musicians and performers and acrobats and circus performers is that they've got to figure out ways to create new storylines. So it's not just about the performance that they're doing, but it's about implementing in storylines and backstories that'll help communicate the experience in a more visual way, a flat visual way. You know, when you're in a room with actors or performers or musicians, you can feel the energy from that room. You can feel the energy from people singing or playing instruments or doing a stage performance, whereas you can't feel that from the screen in a lot of ways. Yeah. So you've got to supplement that emotional context into another storyline. And I think it's a dual thing. And I think we've talked about the idea of doing somewhat hybrid of a documentary. So you're seeing a live performance, but you're also seeing some context or backstory about who these performers are. Is it just a person standing behind the keyboard, or the person is standing at mic number 2 from the left? What is that person's backstory? And is there a way to bring those elements out through storytelling to help make a more well-rounded experience, so somebody's not just watching people perform on screen?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And having the one sort of problem that I face when talking about music particularly is that it can often get too jargon heavy. I suppose this could be a problem with many disciplines, or just when you start talking about nitty-gritty of stuff, just being too boring. You know, there's something about talking about your own work and music that can quickly get too sort of self-indulgent. And so how do you, when you create a storyline, how do you kind of organize or decide what would be interesting to mass public?
Well, you know, the making of the sausage is never pretty, right? Like, the making of the sausage is almost in some cases a little bit boring, but I think it's a reason why people go into this career path that is even more important. You know, it's not just, oh, I went to this school and this is where I learned and this is what who my inspirations were. But it's like, you know, to really get to understand what is the context of being a musician, and especially now. I mean, how important is it for somebody to keep doing their art? You know, I think in a civilized society, we need art. In a modern society, we need culture, we need art. And these are the people that are often taken for granted. And if they go away, it's going to be, it could look like the barbarian era. So to me, I think that there's backstories about the individuals and why they do it. Nobody cares about what you're doing. They only care about why you're doing it. You know, and filmmaking is a context. You know, nobody cares about what kind of lens I'm using to shoot the scene or how we did this special effect. I mean, some people do. But ultimately, when people are watching any kind of featurettes or behind the scenes, it's about the story and about what drove us, what inspired us to create this. Where does that piece of music you just opened, where does that come from? Was it written? Is it a historical piece? What is the context of that material, and why did you choose it? You know, those are all interesting things that are I think, universal, and I think it's something that breaks you from the insider, inside baseball talk that happens a lot of times with artistry and technology.
God, that's such a great point. I mean, no, it's not what you're doing that's interesting, but why you are doing it. I think that's just that simple idea could guide some good narration, some good storytelling as we kind of show our art in this medium.
Right.
How do we organize in our video? Say we're going to make an hour video. How do we organize what we want to say when to say it and how long we should dwell on how long to say something?
Well, the thing about timing, it's about writing things down and actually looking at the clock. If something feels too long, you ultimately know that you need to get out of something. It's always about shifting gears. And in filmmaking, if you linger in a scene too long, the audience gets bored. So it's always important to try to move the story along. And we use what we call beat sheets in filmmaking. And a script, before we sit down and write a screenplay, the screenplay is actually written out in terms of beats. And we look at each little chunk of information as like, this appears on screen for this amount of time. We're in and out of this scene. So I think the same thing could apply to doing a live performance. So if you're thinking about it from a perspective of like, okay, we're going to go live, even though it's live or it's even pre-recorded, the idea is to think about how long you want to open your intro. Is your intro too long? Is your soundbite, is it lingering too long? You want to be snappy and you want to sit down and write that out on paper first before you actually do the performance or do the live stream. The other thing too is rehearse. If you can rehearse, and I know it's tricky with COVID and stuff, but if you can try to at least walk out the dynamics of it, it makes it a lot easier for you to control in the event things like technical glitches happen or things like that'll happen. It just makes it a little bit more controllable and gives people a perspective of how to manage their time, But yeah, definitely look at it. And you also take a moment to understand your own perspective on things. So if you're watching something and it feels like it's too long, you'll start noticing the timing aspect of it. And it's something that you start paying attention to and say, you know what, I need to shift gears. I need to get out of this talking point, or I need to move on to another display.
Okay. And so do you, it sounds like you make a kind of an outline or something, and
I do.
And you probably want to grab more material than you want to err on the side of getting more stuff than less stuff. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's an economy of scale that goes with any kind of production. In a lot of ways, when you're shooting stuff that's not live, the idea is always to give the editor more than they can use, and you can never have enough stuff. But ultimately, when you're working on live performances, the more baggage that you have to maintain, the more options that you have, unless you've got, a big production broadcast truck, and a huge infrastructure to do live stuff, you trip over your own feet sometimes with more things. So some stuff, maybe not all of it needs to be live.
Yeah.
So for example, you could have pre-recorded interviews from your talent or from your cast that you could be serving, just like how you serve that opening video for the stream, that you could insert. So you see a performance, then you cut away to Joe, and Joe's going to talk about, growing up in the mean streets of Seattle and how they came up from you know what I mean? So those are things that could be premeditated that you could design that don't have to necessarily be live.
Yeah.
But overshooting stuff, you can never overshoot enough, but it may be a good idea to start thinking about what stuff you can film before you get to the live broadcast.
Gotcha. So how do you figure out, so when you have, these sort of videos that I'm imagining, we're going to have performances of pieces, just like you heard, and then maybe we'd throw in interviews and some other sort of B-roll footage, as they say. How do you go about like getting that sort of B-roll footage type stuff as you're sort of conceptualizing the thing? Because I find that to be a little bit tricky. Like the B-roll stuff obviously isn't important, but it adds like some dimension or some space to the video. How do you go about kind of figuring out how to deal with that?
Well, again, I think a lot of it's going to be pre-planning. If you can look at your script. I mean, even though you're doing a performance, a musical performance, the idea is to sit down on paper and then figure, okay, I mean, you obviously know timing, so you understand how long a particular song is going to take to render to an audience. You can build that into a schedule, and then you can look at that and say, you know what? We're going to use a segue, and we need to get some shots. These are the 5 shots that we need to get. We need to get an exterior shot of the church. We need to get an exterior shot of, welcome to fabulous Las Vegas sign outside. Whatever it is, those are things that you just kind of put on your shot list of stuff that you can have ready to go and built into the program, ready to get able to be sent live at the right time.
What kind of equipment should we buy? What do you think?
Great question.
How should we approach acquiring the correct cameras and microphones for what we want to do?
Well, there's a lot of great options in technology now, and you can spend a great deal of money running around and buying stuff that you may use only 30% of the time. If you've got the capital, then there's great camera equipments like DSLR style cameras from Sony or Panasonic or Canon. And you can spend $2,000 or $3,000 a pop on each of these pieces of equipment. And those are really great things to have in your tool belt if this is going to be something you're going to do long term, if it's a long term investment. The other thought would be you could use the resources that you have, including your mobile phone or you're an iPad person or what have you, to get some of this content. And a lot of the Android phones and iPhones now are so great at capturing video and great low light situations that you may only need yourself a little gimbal, a little camera gimbal to stabilize your shots so you can get some pretty cool dynamic shots. I seen that you had a drone. I mean, that's way over the top for most people, so to have any kind of tools like that are going to be important. In terms of a particular camera system, I don't know, but it just would depend on your price point. My suggestion would be to, go to places like B&C Camera or B&H Camera and look at that. Look on Amazon, look at a couple of different camera websites and just kind of cross-reference, read the reviews, and ultimately see if it's a price point that makes sense for your investment.
Have you used cell phones in your movies?
We have. I mean, well, not as like the actual film content, but I know there's filmmakers that have, and they are. There's a lot of people using cell phones to shoot, news stuff, and B-roll, for major broadcasters. So I mean, it's a video weapon in your pocket, and the quality is only getting better and better and better. And at the end of the day, some stuff may look too overly produced, so sometimes it works in your advantage to have kind of that run and gun kind of stringer feel to what you're doing.
What about software? I mean, my friend for my big 4-0 coming up in November built me a beast of a machine. Oren Doyle, I'm sure you probably met him. Maybe you have. He was my best man. So I've been trying to make this painful switch to PC, and I am having the worst time trying to find a video editor. Are there software? Are there applications you recommend for PC and Mac that I think do the job well?
Well, I would look, if you're a PC user, there's no reason why you shouldn't look into like Premiere, Adobe Premiere. It's a pretty robust program, and I think maybe 2 or 3 hours on a tutorial should get you through the basics that you need. It's a fairly robust operating or program for the operating system of PC. It also works on Mac, so if you're a Mac user. We use a lot of Final Cut on our programs because we're a Mac-based company, so we use a lot of Apple products. And it's optimized for Apple, so the program works a little better, in my opinion, with Apple. But if you're a PC user and you got the supercomputer your buddy just built you, definitely check out Adobe Premiere and look at it. It's a subscription-based thing, so you don't have to like spend a lot of upfront money for it. It's a monthly subscription thing, or you can do it for the year, and it updates. When it needs to be updated, it updates.
Yeah. So I've been messing around with all sorts of different programs. Adobe Premiere definitely was, I think, the most stable one on the PC. Some of us, I know, including Steven and I think maybe a few other people listening, are doing these virtual choir things. Have you seen those things going around, look like Brady Bunch?
I have seen some of those. Yes.
That's quite demanding on the machine. I mean, I've got, I'll have like 30 layers of video, like on top of each other. And so, getting software to play that back is not, they get kind of cranky. I don't know if have you ever had that many layers in a video, like 30?
Yes. Well, when you're making a movie, you have, 30, 40 different layers. And just to kind of recap, my actual, the DP who worked on our last movie, who is also a musician, and he chimed in and he said, Davinci Resolve. He reminded me, Davinci Resolve is free. So if you're a PC user, try Davinci Resolve. It's for the Black Magic camera family, but it's a great, robust program. A lot of people are using it for color correction, but it's an editor now. So definitely check that out. But yeah, you can stack a lot of video. Your processing power is going to be a problem no matter how robust your system is. And that's why when you're editing, you have to be as organized as possible, and be as streamlined as possible with your media management. Otherwise, it could bog down your system altogether. And sometimes you have to do some exporting and consolidate some of those layers.
Right.
Your computer's not
Compound
able to handle the processing power.
So for those of you out there doing virtual choirs, I still, unfortunately, and I've tried Davinci Resolve, I've tried the studio version, which is $300, and I think it uses some of your GPU, more of your GPU to help render and process. I've used Adobe Premiere Pro, I've used even Filmora 9, I've used Final Cut Pro, and for the virtual choir stuff, I'm afraid that Final Cut Pro is fast for that stuff. Like for me, I don't know if that's in your experience. I mean, it seems like you have roughly the same amount of tracks going, same amount of layers going. Do you find Final Cut to be the fastest in your experience?
Yeah, well, for us anyways, because we're Mac based, and there was a while that we left Final Cut altogether, and we went into using Adobe Premiere. But for me, I like the functionality of it. It's taken a while to get used to it, and there's a lot of things now that I go back and I try to use Premiere for little things, and I'm like, I'm just not used to it. So to me, it's fast, and we do a lot of, I should say, we did in the past a lot of on-site editing for clients. And that was one of the programs that would help us move fast, to have that the ability to output content and not have to worry about some of the more manual things that Adobe Premiere has.
So how do you capture your audio? How do you have a like I actually am curious. How do you capture like interviews, or if people are kind of moving around and they're speaking?
Well, it kind of goes back to your point of equipment. I mean, I think to have a very basic audio, like a wireless microphone or something that can be plugged directly into the camera. Sennheiser makes a good, easy a product to use, that can be basically put into most cameras. So I would say to have yourself the ability to have some mobility is going to be huge. And I think that on a very basic level would be the first starting point. And then you can, of course, invest in booms and things like that to help kind of amplify and add some dynamics to the sound that you're capturing.
And what about lighting? Do you focus on getting a lighting set up, or at this sort of amateur level, or how important do you think that is, getting lighting equipment?
Well, I mean, now lights are pretty inexpensive. I mean, you can pick up lights in a kit now for like $200-300 on Amazon. So I mean, there's so many different options. I think to have some actual video lights are important if you're going to do this on a regular basis, because you don't want it to be a shadowy environment. You don't want it to look flat. And ultimately, when you're doing things like what we're doing here, when you're talking through a computer screen or a cell phone or something like that, you're already going to have optical challenges. So to have some backup stuff with lighting is going to be huge. And again, 3-point lighting, depending on your subject matter, is usually adequate if you're doing like interviews and things like that.
Dieter, that's a good point. My buddy and phenomenal guitarist Dieter here said that if you're associated with a university, there are usually some great discounts you can take advantage of, both in buying equipment, actually, in my experience, and getting your hands on some good software.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely take advantage of the student discounts without a doubt.
Or if you know of a student, make friends with that person.
Yes, absolutely.
So what else, Kelly? Do you have any other tips for us? As we kind of like put our documentary producer hats on.
I think ultimately it's about being organized and pre-planning your performance. Don't take it as one of those things like I'm just going to show up and do this thing. I think the second that you take planning seriously and you make it part of the apparatus and what you're doing, the better your performance is, the better everything is going to come out on the video side. even with the most basic stuff, even with the most basic equipment, if you think about things and you plan things out, it's going to make it for a better viewing experience for the people on the other end. You know, because that's at the end of the day, that's the goal, that's the priority, is to give the folks out there, a really good optimal experience. And you can only do that, in my opinion, if you sit down beforehand and actually figure out the mechanics.
How long should these things be, you think? How long should our end video be?
Well, I got attention deficit disorder, so like me, I'm like 5 minutes tops, I'm out. I'm like, my brain is like moving so fast half the time, so I can't. But no, but honestly, I think, a show should be as long as it needs to be, right? Like it should only be as long as it needs to be. If you feel that, you can stack some really great performances together and tie them together with some good back behind the scenes content, by all means, make your show an hour or something like that. But, don't try to fluff it out. Don't try to fluff it out for the sake of like, oh, I just want to create because on TV they do an hour. Like it doesn't have to be that way. I think of the internet now and how we're experiencing media. It should be very fast. It should be in and out, quick, quick, quick. If something needs to be longer, then it should be longer, but it should only be that way if it needs to be. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to keep in mind. I just feel like boredom is the ultimate enemy in everything about life. So yeah. As we get to the end of this, if people are still listening, feel free to throw in your questions for if you have any, and we'll try to get to them. I guess this is our unofficial Q&A section.
Yeah, I'm kind of reading through this to make sure we didn't miss anything here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody here, Charisma, actually chimed in. She said, but in the end, there's nothing like live performances. So, obviously, you could use this as a promotional tool for your audiences to get to know you. Great point. I mean, all of this stuff is about, creating content, right? So now, as we all move into this digital world of having to express ourselves, I think it's about figuring out ways to maximize the tools that you have to reach new audiences, build new relationships, constantly grow the conversation. And that's what any of this stuff is good for. I use Facebook and social media for one thing, and it's pretty much just to share information. And I'm not talking about news. I'm talking about stuff about the industry and stuff that other people would be interested in on a professional level or on a creative level. And I think that's what these tools are designed for, in my opinion. And then the rest of the time, we should be hoping that we get back together soon and start, hugging and kissing and shaking hands.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is a good opportunity for musicians and artists alike to really think about ways to package or express their art in the most accessible way.
Right.
That I think that's for the sake of the survival of the art or the craft. I think that is it's a good time now to think about that as we are in COVID land. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to add, Kelly? I feel like I'm reaching the end of my big questions here. I mean, we'll throw in some links in the description where people can get maybe buy some of this stuff or a few equipment recommendations for people to get started. But
yeah, well, I just like to say this. I mean, I applaud all the performing artists out there that are struggling. I mean, in our industry, there's in addition to people who have lost their lives during COVID, I mean, on an industry level, restaurant workers, but the performing arts, it's gonna be a long time before we get folks back into the same capacity that we were, and it was already tough beforehand. Artist who is now in a position where they are struggling.
Wow, why did it? I just got like a countdown. Did you see that?
I did. It's telling me to wrap up my speech.
No, I don't know what that was. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Dieter touches on a really it just touches on some philosophy here. Like, would you rather view a video of a live performance or an edited perfect rendition of a piece, even if it has lots of edits?
Well, I think there's benefits to both. There is definitely something to seeing a very streamlined edit, a very tidy and robust kind of thing, and that thing could be used more for marketing maybe. But I do find there's some value in seeing people, um, succeeding or tripping or struggling. There's something about the live aspect of it that kind of makes people feel like they're a part of that moment, and I think that sometimes it plays into, when you're watching like a live sporting event, right? Like if you were to already know the score, the game wouldn't be that exciting if you were watching the recorded session of it. So there's something about the spontaneity of live performances that are exciting. And I think at the end of the day, we can make things look as much as like a broadcast company would make, but I think we should all try to make things simple for ourselves. And if live is better for you and you feel better with limiting the amount of times you got to edit something, then just do live.
Yeah. I mean, there's the key difference here between live and a recorded one is that live you can only experience once in unless it's recorded and then you can like go, but I think it's the experience itself that makes it so valuable and kind of a treasure, really. So when we see, for me personally, I mean, this is sort of a personal thing on some level, but when I go to a live performance and see something executed just on an inhuman like when I go to Cirque du Soleil, uh, just the stuff they do there is incredible. Or when you see a live live music concert, to see people execute at such a high level is a kind of like watching a miracle. And so, whereas when you record something and you're it's all just by nature of the medium, not that way, because you can see it again. So there's a tendency for musicians to want recorded stuff to be perfect, because it's like, I don't want to watch that again and watch me screw up. But so Dieter, I mean, I guess to your question, it's I mean, that's just kind of one of those questions there. Everyone just has their own kind of opinion about.
Yeah, and again, it boils down to the individual. But I think for me as a video editor, there's a lot of magic you can create behind the scenes with visual editing.
Uh-huh.
But again, it may take away from some of the more dramatic elements, the emotional aspects of the performance if you're having to do a lot of edits. But I would suggest this. I would suggest folks, this isn't something that we have to reinvent. I mean, there are people that are doing this in spades right now. So it's just a matter of doing some research and getting and taking some notes on how other people are doing things and how to use the simple tools that you have around you to just kind of add value to what you're already doing or what you already were doing. Because at the end of this tunnel, you want to be able to come out with two things. You want to be able to come out with more knowledge and more options for when to reach people when things like this happen. Because if it's not a pandemic, it could be a storm, or it could be some kind of another thing that you want to reach a population of people that you can normally get to. So I think it's a matter of this is a added tool to what you are already doing, and think of it like that.
Yeah, that's great. So Kelly, what else? Anything else you want to tell us before we have at this ourselves?
Just keep singing. Just keep singing and doing what you're doing. People need hope. And, any kind of hope and positive messages that people can spread, that's what's up.
All right. Well, Kelly, it's been great having you on here. I've been wanting actually to pick your brain about some of this stuff for a while, and I appreciate you being so generous with your time. And I look forward to the next movie. Do we get a whiff of it, or do I get to know?
It's still early stages, man. It's the pregnancy stages of movie making right now for us. We don't even know when we can make a movie yet. I mean, we're still, there's colleagues of mine who shoot movies. Like I'm not risking anything for a while. So we're gonna be kind of designing things for a while, if you would.
Nice. Well, best of luck to you, and good to see you, chat on the airwaves, and love to the little one and the family. So thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Well, I'll see you at a wedding or a ceremony or some kind of family event in the future, I'm sure. So hopefully I'll see you before then.
Excellent. All right, Kelly. Thanks so much.